Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, and Antonio Margarito. All three of these fighters have something in common. Above all, what they mostly have in common is they're not as good as they self-proclaimed or what the media hyped them up to be, but they're not as bad as some people make them out to be too. Like my Margarito video that I made last, called Analyzing Antonio Margarito. It wasn't made to bash him as a bum or as if he's nothing. No, the guy's attributes alone, his chin, his heart, his constant pressure style, that alone makes him a threat. You know, it's something to contend with. Anybody just can't beat Antonio Margarito. You know, anybody just cannot beat Antonio Margarito. He's obviously not a bum. When people use that phrase, they use that term loosely. They use it as hatred. They use it as a strong dislike. It's just a loose term that's used. But there's bums in boxing, believe it, and Antonio Margarito's not one of them. But was he a champion? He won a vacated title. You know, he was a champion, but he was never a unified champion. He never was an undisputed champion. So, you know, I guess we have champions at different levels nowadays in boxing. That's just how the sports ran. We never really rarely get to see a unified champion, which would make an undisputed champion of a division. But going on to Manny Pacquiao, I think Pacquiao's out of his prime. I think in his prime, a lot may suggest that he was on steroids. It hasn't been proven. It's not a fact. It hasn't been proven. Just like Antonio Margarito, it hasn't been proven that he had plaster his whole career or that he had it for some fights. Because remember, it's only been proven that he attempted to use it during one fight, which was the Shane Mosley fight. He attempted to use it. That's a fact, that he attempted to use it. But there's no proof that he ever used it ever in the ring. Ever in the ring. In any fight, Antonio Margarito may have never used plaster. It hasn't been proven as a fact. And the rematch with Cotto damn sure didn't prove nothing. So, on to Mayweather lastly. Now, Mayweather is basically, it hasn't been proven that he's the best fighter of all time. That's what he says. He's a very good fighter, but he's not as good as his fanatics make him out to be and some of the media. You know, I can't putting up Floyd Mayweather's resume. His resume isn't the strongest resume. You know, as a matter of fact, for a man that's put up pound for pound, his resume is pretty weak. If you look at the guys that he's faced, as opposed to everybody that he could have faced, and the time at which he faced them. For instance, De La Hoya was out of his prime. Shane Mosley was way out of his prime. You know, if he had a lot more wins like Diego Corrales, it would make his resume a lot better. But he's now fighting these guys that should have been on his resume like Cotto, and he's fighting them out of their prime. Although I don't think Cotto could have beat Floyd even in his prime. But I'm just saying, all this stuff adds up. So how can he proclaim to be the best fighter to ever lace up a pair of boxing gloves? You know, there's so many. I think Tommy Hearns could have knocked Floyd Mayweather the fuck out. You know, I think Tommy Hearns could have destroyed him. If we're talking pound for pound now, I think Marvin Hagler can beat anybody, hands down. But that's just my opinion. I think there's not a guy out there, pound for pound wise, with the style of Marvin Hagler. Marvelous. I think Marvelous could beat anybody because that was his name that he got changed legally to Marvelous. I think Marvelous could beat anybody. Again, that's just my opinion. I think Sugar Ray Leonard would have gave Mayweather a hell of a fight. I favor Mayweather in that fight, but in boxing, anything can happen. You know, so, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard, I think, could destroy Mayweather in his prime. Excuse me, Sugar Ray Robinson. I think could have destroyed Mayweather in his prime. So for Mayweather, it hasn't been proven that he's the best fighter of all time, especially with his resume. But we look at his skill, and his skill set is so complete, although most of it is built on athleticism, because again, Mayweather's not your traditional boxer. He does stuff that breaks the elements. That's why when people make the comparison of Roy Jones to Mayweather, it's kind of funny because people will say, oh, well, Roy Jones only relied on athleticism. Mayweather relies on athleticism too. Speed, reflexes, that shell defense that he's perfected. That thing uses a lot of energy, the agility, the ability to turn your body left and right in a fast motion. You know, Floyd Mayweather holds his hands down a lot of the times. He doesn't even keep them up by his head. He breaks the elements. He's not a fundamental boxer the way I would say Eric Morales is. Eric Morales is a guy that's very fundamentally sound. That's why even in his old age, he's able to accomplish things like against a young force like Mike Donna. He was able to outbox him for the most part. It's because of those fundamentals. Floyd Mayweather, I'm not saying he can't perform those fundamentals, but he doesn't. A lot of times he goes out of the element. It's just that Roy Jones was flashier when he did it. But if you really look at the two fighters, they're the same. Mayweather holds his hands down, throws his jabs from his waist a lot of times. Mayweather's a pot shotter. He's not your traditional boxer. He's a pot shotter. He's a guy that's very defensively sound, and he pot shots. He picks all his shots. At times he can become a puncher in spots, but he's really not a boxer. Unless you want to say he's a today's version of a new equipped boxer. I mean, if you want to say that, but in Mayweather's style actually is very unique in the way he goes about doing it, but it's all based off athleticism, much like Roy Jones Jr. Best believe when Mayweather's old, he's not going to be able to keep up with this style that he has, unless he turns into a more conventional boxer like a Morales, you know. Yeah, start doing things like holding his hands up, when he's jabbing and bringing it back to his face. There's a lot of things that Mayweather does that he breaks the rules, man. You just gotta observe him. He doesn't stuff that you wouldn't teach a young fighter to do. He breaks the rules and he gets away with it because he's so gifted. He's tremendously gifted, but he hasn't proven that he's the best fighter of all time. That's just what he self-proclaims, but he hasn't proven it with his resume. Maybe with his skills he has, but with his resume he hasn't. And if you don't have the resume, the resume and the skills go hand in hand. They coordinate with each other. So if you don't have the resume to back it up, you can have all the skills in the world. You just don't have the resume to back it up. Antonio Margarito, once again, he was a good fighter, but he was never the most fair fighter in the world. He just wasn't. It was a title that Bob Arum gave to him, and people ran with it. The fact is that the guy built his way up fighting no names. That's the truth. That is the God honest truth. I think the first fight that he ran into, I'm not sure if it was Clottey or who. I think it might have been Joshua Clottey, in which he had problems until Clottey broke his hand. But that building his name up he built his name up off fighting bums mostly. I don't want to call those guys even bums, but no names, no names. And as far as Manny Pacquiao goes, I think his stock just dropped big time. And I don't know if, like I said, if this is basing it off his last two fights, Manny Pacquiao's out of his prime, because this is a guy that's style definitely takes a lot of energy. His style takes a lot of energy, so Manny Pacquiao was a good fighter, man. A lot of people want to hate on him and call him bums. You notice that none of the great fighters call Manny bums, like B-Hop, Sugar Ray Leonard, James Toney. All those guys give Manny Pacquiao his props. It's usually, to be truthful, it's usually majority, because this thing has turned into a race war. Majority, you could say the average black man hates on Manny Pacquiao. But the black man that's a fighter, for guys that are actual fighters, they give Manny Pacquiao the respect, such as myself. I don't know why that is. You can go figure that out. But Manny Pacquiao's a very good fighter in my book. But he was he as good as the media hyped him up to be? No. People were saying drastic stuff. He's Henry Armstrong and shit like that. That's taking it overboard. But yes, he is a very good fighter. Just like Mayweather is a very good fighter, probably the best fighter of this era, hands down, in my opinion. And Antonio Margarito was an okay fighter. He was an okay fighter, but it's a lot of fighters that could beat Margarito easily, But Margarito's attributes alone took him somewhere in the sport that a lot of people won't go. Like I said, the way I started this video, all in all, these three guys, they're not as good as some people proclaim them to be, or they themselves might proclaim to be, or the media might hype them up to be. But they're also not as bad as some people make them out to be as well. So I always 100, man. I'm out.